All right. Well, hi, everyone. Now it's our official beginning. If you are just now joining, my name is Sophie Matthews. I am the Student and Recent Graduate Engagement Specialist at the CSU Alumni Association. And I have the great pleasure to work with Angela over here, my coworker. We're just really excited that you all are here tonight and spending your afternoon with us or your nighttime, wherever you're joining us. Um, Again, I don't know where you all are at, but I hope it's sunny and warm. Where we are, it's very cold
Oh,
and
yeah.
windy. So again, thank you all for being here again with us. One thing I just do want to do really quick is I want to thank our CSU Alumni Association members who are on this call because it makes events like this possible. So if you are interested in learning about membership at all, and if you're interested in exploring all that we at the Alumni Association have to offer for you, you can download our mobile app if you just type in like Colorado State Alumni, CSU Alumni, Colorado State University Alumni on your app store of choice. It should come up. And then that's a really good way to get in contact with us and for us to get in contact with you and let us know when we're coming to your city. So for all those out of staters on here, we come to you and we would love to have you join us. We do also have other virtual events coming up, and I will be linking our events calendar, which does have those, as well as if you are in Colorado, we have some in-person events, and then we do have some select national events as well. So I will be linking that in just a minute, but make sure you check that out and come join us when you can. And then if you need technology help, please feel free to drop that in the chat down here. If for some reason you aren't able to access the chat, you can go back to that confirmation email that you received from us, and you can email me directly and I will help, or do my best to help at least. And then I will also drop my email in the chat for you all if you are interested in connecting with me one-on-one, or if you need anything during this. But again, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm super excited to introduce Angela and to kick over and have us all learn about how we can find some remote work.
Hello, everybody. Thank you again for being here tonight. My name is Angela Hayes, as Sophie said, and I'm the Associate Director of Alumni and Online Career Engagement. I want to mention a couple of things. My voice isn't completely back from COVID, so I'm going to do my best. I've got my hot tea right here, but if we run into trouble, I'll just do my very best. I'll get closer to the microphone. Also, I wanted to mention the chat. If you'd wait for questions later on, we're going to spend about 20 minutes going over the material, and then I'll take questions. Like Sophie said, if you have any technical problems, certainly drop those in the chat now. And if you want to talk to me through the chat, if you want to ask a question, but for some reason you don't want your name broadcast to everybody that's on the call, just go to, instead of having it on everyone, you would just put it on hosts and panelists. And that way Sophie and I would be the only ones that would be able to see it. Then I will state your question and answer it, but I won't say what your name is. So let's see, let's get started here. We'll be sending this PowerPoint to those who attended this live webinar soon, because we've got a lot of hyperlinks that you'll be able to start working with right away. If you're watching this through YouTube, you can find the links just under the YouTube video. If you're looking at the links directly from the PowerPoint, just switch it to slideshow view, and that'll make all the links clickable. So, remote job openings were already on the rise well before COVID. So, for example, from 2017 to 2019, remote jobs went up 270%. And now, given the positive aspects of remote work that employers saw during lockdown and after lockdown for some, even more employers are wanting the chance to recruit a vast pool of talent unrestricted by geographic distance. Sometimes there are restrictions. We're going to talk about what those are in a bit. In the last several years before COVID, the majority of remote jobs were a combination of at-home and office work. Something to keep in mind as a place to start, if you choose, is that if you did remote work during lockdown, because you were able to show how productive you could be in that remote capacity, but you've been brought back to the office, but would prefer to go back to remote work, certainly you could try to make a case with your organization, your supervisor, about going back to full-time remote work because you did it for all that time. If that doesn't work, or if your organization is one that doesn't see that as a possibility, then there are plenty of other places that do. And we will talk about how you can find remote work in other organizations. I want to spend a little bit of time thinking about the pros and cons of working from home to make sure that this is something that's going to be a good fit for you before you pursue it. So some of the pros, they're obvious. No commute. That's great. That's a huge time saver. Your own schedule. Nobody's watching. Depending on the nature of your work, you could get your work done at any time, as long as your work is getting done. For a lot of jobs, not all jobs, because it depends on time zones and that kind of thing, but for a lot of jobs, you can work literally anywhere, from your back deck, if it's nice out, to working in a different country every few months. Family time, obviously, you don't want them to invade your workspace, but you'll have more family time, more flexibility with that. Just costs in general, not just commuting costs, but you can say goodbye to $13 substandard salads and maybe expensive work attire. And the office stress and distractions, no one's stopping by your desk and distracting you from your work. Also, there's generally no to very little office drama and politics with remote work. Now let's talk about some of the cons. It can be lonely, especially if you're an extrovert. Working 5 days per week, completely alone, can get lonely. If you haven't done it, if you didn't do remote work before, you might want to try it out for a bit or see what that would be like for several days to just be working on your computer from home and see if that feels like a good fit. Also, overworking has been shown to be a problem for many people who are working remotely. You would think underworking might be the problem, right? Because people have potential distractions at home. But actually, what a lot of people find is they have difficulty separating their home life and their work life, and they end up working more than they would if they were going to an office, and then sort of on the drive home, they disengage from that, and then they're ready for home life when they get home. So burnout can become very real, and it can happen very quickly. Underworking certainly could also be a possibility. If you're someone who really benefits from the motivation of having a supervisor there, not necessarily watching you or micromanaging you, but just a supervisor there who's checking in and who's asking about your work and that kind of thing. If that motivates you to get your work done or get more work done, then working from home might not be best for your level of motivation. Also, the water cooler moments. A lot of people that I've worked with, and it's in the literature too, say that the lack of ability to just have those spontaneous conversations that happen in the office, maybe spontaneous brainstorming, that just isn't as likely to happen in a remote environment, but you can build it in through Slack and whatever other ways that you're keeping in contact with your coworkers. It's just not quite the same, not yet anyway. It can limit your social activities with your team. So let's say you're in an organization that 10% of the workforce is remote and you're one of them. When they go to happy hours or they do social kinds of things, you might be too far away to join them. Another thing that we need to be real about is that it might be great for the middle-aged worker who has already built up an extensive professional network It might be considerably less appealing for a 20-something who is trying to find their way and make connections in the new company. Also, and this is really important to remember, but there's ways around it, but not as many ways around it as I'd like. So the research shows that you have roughly half of the chance of being promoted if you're working remotely. And that's for a variety of reasons. That out of sight, out of mind. There's still some stigma with some employers who think that on-site employees are more productive or more committed, none of which is true, but there's still that stereotype out there. So one of the things you'll want to do is make sure, if you see promotion as something you want to have in your future, make sure that you're very visible. Be intentional about being visible every day, virtually connecting with colleagues. Show up for everything, like any kind of gathering. If you can Zoom in virtually, just make sure that you're visible, and make sure your boss knows what you're doing, knows about your accomplishments, knows about your work ethic. Okay, so these are the main areas that we're going to cover. How to be strategic in each of these areas: preparing for your search, spotting and avoiding scams, researching companies and remote work websites, and preparing your application materials in ways that make you an attractive candidate for remote work. These are the most common keywords to use when you're looking for remote work. So you might use these in Google, and put it in quotations: remote work and IT, telework and project management. Or you can put the type of position you're looking for into the remote work sites. We'll be talking about those in a bit. If you're on a typical job board or a company website that has a number of locations, in the where part of the screen, you can put telework or remote work, or you can also upload your resume to these sites with making it clear that you're looking for remote work only. Keep in mind that different companies use different job titles for the same type of work, so you'll want to do some research on the companies of interest, see what job titles are used for your preferred positions. Also, please note that using the words work from home or work at home have an incredibly high likelihood of returning results that are job scams. So much better to use the other terms that we've listed here. All right, the common career fields for remote work. I purposely gave you the list that existed before COVID, so you know that these are the most likely places to find well-established remote jobs in these fields. However, nearly everything else that doesn't require an employee's physical presence is on the table now. In some cases, you'll need to be creative and persuasive in explaining how you can do the job completely remotely. So you'll want to be ready to explain your ideas for getting work done effectively and efficiently. And remember, you're going to be getting all of these slides. So that's why I put so much information on each of the slides, so that you'll have everything that you need. So let's talk a little bit about scams. In a remote job search, it's really important to spot scams because there are a lot of them, unfortunately. Now, there won't be I'll point out the job sites that you won't find any scams, and then some that you might, but probably not. So we'll get to that in a bit. But ways to know that it's a scam: if they ask you to pay for anything up front, often they'll ask you to pay for training, your plane ticket, and other expenses to go to the training. No, just no. That's a scam. That's not something you want to get involved with. Or if they don't interview you, or they interview you through instant messenger chat, that's a scam. You'll want to look for detailed job descriptions to make sure it's legitimate. A scam job will give you a vague, usually very vague job description that shows very little work for lots and lots of money. Also look for grammatical errors, lots of exclamation points. Anything that just looks off to you probably is. Search for the word scam and the company or job title. You'll see plenty of reports and articles if they're a scam. And ask them a lot of questions. What are the key qualifications for this job? How long have you been in business? Who are your customers? And trust your gut and listen to your instincts. Anything that seems off to you probably is. Anything that seems to be too good to be true, it is. You can always call me as well. I can talk with our employer relations team and see if they've dealt with this particular organization, and then I can pass their recommendations back to you. There are a lot more scams right now because of the chaos of the last few years, so stay vigilant. And again, always feel free to give me a call or drop me an email to just double check, just to have another set of eyes. I've worked with a number of people who have fallen for some of these scams because they're just so excited to get a remote job. The remote job is really important because they have underlying conditions or a family member does. So they were just a little overzealous and maybe didn't check everything that they could have checked. So get in touch with us if you have questions about that. To research companies that offer remote work, you can start with the FlexJobs list of the top 100 rated companies with remote jobs, and then the list of thousands of companies that have offered remote jobs in the past. Even if they're not on either of these lists, companies of interest might very well have remote jobs. They just might not have them posted. Mostly the reason for that is that people like to hire people they know. And for remote jobs especially, they want to hire people they know, that they already trust. So if you're interested in a job and they don't know you, get in touch with me, because we'll talk about how you can do informational interviews to network yourself into some of those organizations. You can also get in touch with HR, recruiters, hiring managers, and employees to find out more. Find out if they have remote jobs. This could be through social media, LinkedIn, or contacting people directly through a call or an email. So I've given you a couple of pages here of remote work sites. And the reason for that is most regular job sites don't have a great remote jobs filter. So it's much easier to apply on sites that are specific to remote jobs. These resources that I've given you focus specifically on remote job listings, and that's all. Now, some of them have a small component of needing to come in, like coming in for training or coming to the main office to meet with customers once a quarter or something like that. Something else to keep in mind is some of these platforms are for freelance jobs, which means you'll be responsible for paying taxes and you won't qualify for the usual company benefits like health insurance, retirement plans, and so on. You basically have no protections that an employee of the company would have. I won't read through all of these since you'll be getting these slides soon, but I'd like to point out a couple of things. FlexJobs, you will find no scams on that site. They have people that are devoted to doing nothing but sifting through, checking and double checking and making sure that it is scam free. Same thing for remote.co, which is their sister site, but we'll get to that in just a minute. So for FlexJobs, you can often find 30 to 50% off coupons floating around to become a member, because with FlexJobs, you can look to see what jobs they have, to see if there's anything of interest. And then it's not very expensive. It's like $7.95 or something like that a month. And usually people are only on there for a couple months or 3 months until they find their job. That's with the coupon code typically. So you'll want to look for that. Also, FlexJobs sometimes does virtual career fairs They've already done one this year. That was last month, but there should be more coming up. So you can check on that as well. So as I said, remote.co is their sister site. The jobs there are 100% remote. That's not the case with flex jobs. Like I said, once in a while, you might have to come in for a quarterly this or to meet with a client or that kind of thing. But remote.co, the other thing about that, which isn't the case for many of these sites, is that there is no restriction geographically. So a lot of places, they need to have you working in a certain state or a certain region for a variety of reasons. It could be licensing, could be for tax purposes, but remote.co, that's worldwide. You can be anywhere in the world and work for them or through that site. I want to point out just a couple of other things here. Both FreeUp and Boldly will vet and interview you before you're allowed on the site. In the case of Boldly, for example, they'll match you with companies that fit your skill set, and you have to have at least 7 years of experience in your field to gain entry to that site. Remote Jobs Club scans many remote job sites and sends you emails of opportunities based on the criteria that you've entered. Slack communities are a great way to get connected with remote workers across all industries. Also, there's very often recruiters on those platforms, and very often there'll be jobs posted there that you won't see anywhere else. So there's been kind of a shift to not just remote job sites, but job sites that also have a pretty active community of remote workers and remote recruiters. So it's really helpful, and I've listed several here. Like the last one, this NOMA collective, they travel the world, and their group talks about, okay, now let's all go to Spain. It's pretty cool. So since most jobs, whether it's remote or not, now these job sites are very good, but if you can combine them with networking, you're golden. Just clicking apply isn't going to yield the same results as also networking your way in, either through employees that work there or recruiters that you meet on some of these sites. Again, people like to hire people they know. So get out there and be known. It's also helpful to know the difference between fully and partially distributed companies. So a distributed is a word describing companies that don't have an office at all. They don't have a headquarters. They don't have anything. Everyone in the company works remotely. Partially distributed companies are companies with one or more remote workers. So these companies might describe themselves as remote friendly or remote flexible. You might see that on their websites. Most fully distributed companies have very solid onboarding and training programs. Partially distributed companies sometimes struggle with transitioning to having remote workers. So you'll want to ask questions about onboarding and training when you receive a job offer from one of these companies, so you'll be as prepared as possible for success. When you're ready to apply, know that learning how to get a remote job is no more difficult than getting a regular job. It's just different. The two main things that employers are looking for in a remote employee are trustworthiness and people who obviously love their work. Consequently, don't be surprised if you get questions about you as a person, way more than you would get in a regular job interview where you'd be in the office with them and they could see you every day and see what kind of worker you are. I won't say anything as trite as be yourself, but in interviews for remote jobs, dialing back the corporate jargon and acting like yourself makes the interviewer see you as more trustworthy, and they feel more comfortable with you, more real. Also, as I mentioned, hiring managers will look for people who love the type of work they do, because those are the people who are much less likely to get distracted by other things during the workday. Showing that you really care about your work will resonate with the interviewer. They're also looking for problem solvers, because things will come up as a remote worker and you can't get in touch with IT and you can't just walk across the hall to talk to someone and get an answer. Beyond having the skills and experience in the job description, employers want to see evidence that you're flexible and disciplined enough to work alone. Consider adapting your resume to highlight any previous remote work experience, as well as including achievements gathered while working from home. Did you solve a big crisis when you were working from home? Did you put on a huge presentation? Tell recruiters about it. Rewrite your resume and cover letter to emphasize, for instance, projects where you collaborated with distant teammates, maybe across different time zones. Since working at home means you'll have limited access to the company IT help desk, it's smart to include a list of collaboration software and web and video conferencing tools that you know how to use. Also be thinking now about how you'll answer the questions, why do you want to work remotely? And what skills do you have that make you productive in a remote work environment? They will ask you those. So you want to be ready for that. And now is the perfect time to upskill as you're moving to remote work. Analyze job descriptions that interest you and see what skills and experience are needed. Consider whether you have those exact skills, whether you've had them in the past, but you might need to brush up, or you don't have them at all. Use that information to determine what you need to learn to make you an even better candidate. Like we discussed earlier, many of the skills you might need would be related to working remotely, like learning how to use collaboration platforms like Slack or Microsoft Teams, video software for meetings and presentations like Zoom or GoToMeeting. Think in terms of what will help convince the employer that you're ready to tackle working from home. If you can, find out what platforms are being used by the companies you're most interested in and start learning those platforms if you don't already know them. You can also list on your resume that you're currently taking courses to master those platforms with an expected completion date. I provided a list of free or low-cost training and certifications here. These are good, solid places to get this learning and certification, heavily vetted. You can also upscale, of course, by doing volunteer work, short projects, or freelance work. It's important to make a plan for what you want to have mastered in terms of these new skills and do your best to stick to a schedule of completion. I'm not going to tell you the percentage of people that don't finish because it's too depressing. It's pretty low, especially if it's something like a MOOC, something where there's not interaction between the person teaching and you. So if you get into a situation like that, maybe collaborate with others who are taking the classes, do whatever you need to do so that you can keep moving forward. And I know people can get super busy and it can be really difficult to keep moving forward, but you don't have to do a lot, just a little bit each day. As long as you have a forward motion, you're doing well. And then during your job search, and always take care of yourself by eating well, exercising, getting enough sleep, and go easy on yourself. Job search is usually not fun. It can be kind of crushing sometimes, especially when you're really excited about a job, feel like it's just perfect for you, but they found someone else that's even more perfect. Also, we're all at some level of fight, flight, or freeze reaction, given the number of things that are currently happening in our country and in the world. And that can make people feel a bit fuzzy, not as motivated, angry at the situation, fearful, and a variety of other reactions. Taking care of yourself and those you care about is the best way to reduce those feelings. Control what you can and try to let go of what you can't. Also keep in mind that if you're feeling badly about the things that are going on, especially if you're angry, it's probably going to come across, or if you're very low energy because of the things going on, it'll come across in an interview. So work with whoever you need to work with, do whatever you need to do to help yourself feel better so that you'll be the best possible candidate as you go through your job search. If you'd like to contact me individually, you'll find my contact information here. I would be delighted to work with you on your job search. All right. What questions do you have for me? And again, you can just hover over the bottom. You'll see chat. You can either put everyone or you can put it just to me. So I explained everything perfectly and there are no questions apparently. Oh, here we go. That was a lot of great information. Excited to really dig in. Yes, and again, get in contact with me if you have more questions or, oh, go back to my contact information. Yes, I can. There you go. Oh, okay, thanks. How does someone leave a remote job without burning bridges? The same way you would any other job. So you would write a very nice letter of resignation. You would keep good contact with the people that you worked with. You hopefully will get good references from where you worked. I'm trying to think how to say this exactly. So because again of what we've all been through the last 3 years and what we continue to go through, I've seen a lot, and you've seen this in the news too. There's been a lot more people just losing it in public. We're under a lot of pressure. And so I've also seen a lot more of slamming doors, I quit, burning. I've seen a lot more burning bridges. So it's a good question. Let me say another thing about that. When something hits your stress button, like when something happens that really makes you angry or it's upsetting or whatever it is, there's 8 seconds elapsed time between the time that happens, between the time that button is pushed and your body reacts with fight, flight, or freeze. Usually fight or flight in a situation like this, in a job situation. So after 8 seconds, that's when cortisol, adrenaline, blood flows away from the extremities. Very importantly, blood flows away from the brain. So we're not thinking very clearly. So it's helpful to remember that. So if something makes you angry or you're upset about something, think about 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000. Seems like it goes by in an instant, but it doesn't. It's 8 full seconds that you have to reflect and decide how you want to deal with whatever that situation is and whether or not you want to burn bridges, which is, you don't ever want to burn bridges. You never know who those people know or when you might come in contact with them again, or when they might move to another organization that's your dream organization. It's not worth it. Even if it's a bad work environment, you still want to leave on good terms for you. Yeah, so let's see. Do I work remotely? If so, what are some tips and tricks or strategies that you use to be successful? I work remotely. So during COVID lockdown for about, and I talked to Sophie about this before and others, time kind of warps in terms of COVID. Like I can tell you what happened before COVID if it happened before COVID, but during COVID, it's been odd. I think I was completely remote for 2 years, but I'm not completely certain about that. Now I work remotely on Mondays and Fridays. And when I do a presentation, I work remotely because the office behind me, I never know when if one person is there or 2 people are there, it's fine. If 3 people are there, it's a party and it's loud. So I work remotely when I'm doing a presentation. And for me, it's easy because I absolutely love this job. I absolutely love this kind of work. So, but some specific tips are make sure that you have a designated workspace that's away from anyone else that you're living with. Make sure that you have a really great internet connection. I know in the beginning of COVID, many of us found out that we did not when we tried to work remotely. And I think that's about it. Because if you don't like what you're doing, which there's a pretty high, the statistics are pretty high for people not liking what they're doing, get in touch with me and we will find something that you do like. Because that's the biggest part of it. It's really easy to not get distracted, really easy to get the work done when you love what you're doing. Okay, so Sophie's saying that she works in a hybrid format and that can be a whole other thing to handle. Do you want to expand on that, Sophie? Is there something about it that, I mean, I know for me, I'll be whatever folder of things I need is at the office. I've gotten better about that, but early on in the hybrid, that was a frequent thing. The book that I wanted to reference, it's at the office, it's not here, or it's here and it's not at the office. How about for you, Sophie?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think like one of the biggest challenges for me to overcome is that at certain times, not a lot of people train on hybrid work. Like we went into COVID and it was, here's how to be virtual or here's how to be essential, basically. And so I think working through like, okay, I know how to fully function remotely and I know how to fully function in person, but like, where does that crossover happen,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that that can be another reason to connect with other remote workers. And I did a search for blogs on how to do remote and hybrid, and there's thousands of them. So that could be another place to look to get ideas about how to make it the most effective and efficient and the least stressful, because it can be stressful running back and forth. What if you worked remotely years ago and saw the pluses and minuses, traveled Tuesday through Friday, starting a company division? How is it different today? That's a good question. I would say that one of the things that's different today, and it depends on how long ago you're talking about, but one of the things that's different today is so many people are so much more used to working remotely now, and we have tools that are so much better. Even in the beginning of lockdown, you probably remember, those of you who worked remotely, we were not prepared, and the tools were, I mean, you probably remember the Zoom bombing that was going on and that kind of thing. The tools weren't perfect then. They're not perfect now either, but they're much better. Also, it's much more respected. Not in every company. There are companies that think if you're not on site, you're not working, which is completely not true, but there's that stereotype out there. I think people are just more comfortable with it because we were forced into it, and we were able to see how productive we could actually be, and our employers got to see how productive we could be. Do you have any specific questions that one could ask a company about their onboarding processes? Something that could indicate they're committed to doing this successfully? Yes, and I would do a few things there. I wouldn't just ask them. I mean, I would ask them about their onboarding process and have them email that to you so that you can, and again, you could check in with me if you want. And I could say, okay, that's not really an onboarding process. They're really not doing much of anything. Because a lot of companies think they have an onboarding process or think they have a good onboarding process. And really it's orientation, which is not the same thing at all. Onboarding includes training specific to what you need. And it's much more involved than just orientation. So I'd want to see a list of what they do for onboarding. I would also get on Glassdoor and on LinkedIn and talk with people who have worked for that company before. Okay, so on Glassdoor, there's a couple of different things I want to say about this. On Glassdoor, you want to be careful because these might be people who you want to take it with a grain of salt because you don't know why they left the company. There could be reasons that had to do with them. But if you see a pattern of people saying, yeah, they just kind of threw me in there and I didn't know what to do and I had to figure it out. And then by the time I figured it out, I realized that I totally missed the commission for the first 3 months because nobody told me about that. So if you see a pattern like that, then that's absolutely something to pay attention to. On LinkedIn, you can, so first of all, on LinkedIn, it says that you have to have the premium account to be able to in-mail anyone you want. You don't. All you need to do is find the people you want to talk to, go to the bottom of their profiles, see what groups they belong to, join 1 or 2 of those groups, and then you can message them directly through the group and it'll go to just them. So you can ask, but be careful about how you ask. So for example, if you see that they used to work for company X, instead of saying, what was the culture like? Or was it bad? Or, something that kind of boxes them in. You can say something like, what did you like best about working there? Or what did you like best about the onboarding process and training? So it gives them license to be as honest as they want to be or as vague as they want to be. And if you're getting vague answers, that tells you something. If you keep getting vague answers about something, or if people are really angry, of course, they often will be pretty specific, although they don't want to burn bridges. So you don't want to set them up to burn bridges. So you ask those questions more broadly. Let's see. When I think of the serendipitous water cooler moments in person, I think of brainstorming synergy and getting to know coworkers better. Are there ways to create those types of encounters virtually without seeming creepy? Asking overtly personal questions, sharing too much about my current projects, or prying into the projects of others. Yes. Another thing that you'll want to look for in a remote position or a company that is going to employ you remotely is to ask about how that sort of thing is handled. For example, a lot of companies have Slack or Teams where it's just, they have an open time between 1 and 3 where people can just drop in and chit chat. They have virtual events, virtual happy hours, a variety of different things where you can at least socialize with each other. And then through Teams, if you're all on the same team within a, you're in a team, and also in Teams, you're designated as a team and everybody's listed. You can send messages back and forth about how things are going with that particular project. One of the things, and you implied it here, but didn't say it directly, it's more difficult in a remote situation to get into teams and committees that are doing things that you're interested in, but you might not even know that they're happening because you're remote. So another thing would be to talk to them early, or talk to your supervisor about the kinds of goals that you have and the kinds of experiences you want to gain, so that that person can keep an eye out for additional experiences that you can have, committees that you might work on. You might ask, like on a quarterly basis, can you tell me what committees They might send you a list of committees or projects that are happening. So none of that's creepy. It's just keeping up with what's going on in the organization. And you will hear a lot less personal kinds of things than you would if you were at the organization. It's just true. I mean, it's just less likely that somebody will set up a Zoom meeting to complain to you about their husband. You know, it's just not as likely, which I actually see as a positive. How to handle generational differences with coworkers who all work remote. Oh, wow. That would be like a whole day seminar. Let me think of an easy way to answer that. There's not an easy way to answer that. That's a deep subject. I mean, right now we have 4 generations in the workplace, and there's some, I mean, some of it's stereotype, but there are some very real differences between how people view their work. So for example, baby boomers, I'm at the tail end of the baby boomers, have a tendency to think that 8 to 5 is the way to, I'm not that way. Since I'm at the tail end, I'm kind of just not there, but 8 to 5 is the only way to do it. And you need to be, you can't turn your camera off because everybody's got to show their face, and why is this person allowed to do this and that? So there can be, whereas some of the other generations are like, chill, you know, what's the big deal about this? But it goes a lot deeper than that. I actually will be giving a presentation about that, Sophie. I don't remember when. It might be early next year, but we'll come back to that. It's a loaded subject, and there's a lot to talk about there. Do you think you need to be an expert in a field to get a remote job? I guess, is a company less likely to train or not necessarily? Maybe this is when them knowing you would have a huge impact. Yes. Yes to the last, maybe them knowing you has a huge impact. It does. Do you need to be an expert in your field to get a remote job? Absolutely not. Employers expect you to have 60 to 70% of what they're asking for in the position description, whether that's a remote job or an in-person job. Now, you make a fair point that if it's going to be a remote job, it might be that they're going to want to know that you've got more experience than, say, someone who's coming in entry level, and they're going to be on site where their supervisor knows that they can train them and watch over them and mentor and that kind of thing. So it could be more difficult if it's an entry level kind of a position, possibly, depending on the aspects of the job, you know, how big of a deal a mistake would be, for example. Are they less likely to train? If it's a company who's completely remote, they're absolutely just as likely to train. If it's a company that's starting to work with remote workers, like we talked about, maybe 10% are remote. Some of those trainings might be in person and in person only. So it could be that you'd need to go there to get the training. And, but it also depends, because the other thing that you could do, let's say that's the case and you're 3 states away and you just can't go in for a 3-hour training. It just wouldn't make sense. You can negotiate with them about having them pay for you to get on LinkedIn Learning or something like that to get the training that you need. But don't shortchange yourself in terms of training. Find out what training other people are getting and make sure that you're getting it too, one way or another. Work with your supervisor to make sure you're getting that training. Not only for this job, but for your career. You're going to want to build up a lot of skills in whatever job you're in so that you're ready for the next job or ready to be promoted where you are. Okay. Let's see, are there any other questions? Speaking of training versus orientation, how can you determine a company's overall philosophy in this area? I've encountered training, yeah, that has been nothing more than bird's eye view of the subject matter, unfortunately. Yeah, I have too, only because I always want training to go way deeper than it does. I think of almost all training as bird's eye. The company's overall philosophy, certainly you can start with their website to see what they say about that. You can see if they have a training department within the company and look to see what past trainings have happened and who has access to those trainings. You can specifically ask in the interview. You don't want to lead with that. You don't want to start early with that because that can put them on the defensive. So you want to be closer to like the end of the interview where they say, what questions do you have for us? Or even wait until you're offered the position. If you've done this research on what their training program is like and you just don't feel comfortable, you feel like there's some gaps, then that's where you can talk to them and possibly, like for instance, if training is really important to you, it's very important to me. So if training is really important to you, you might, let's say, since they aren't going to have to pay relocation costs, they're not going to have to do any of that. Maybe instead of a one-time sign-on bonus, or maybe in addition to, you negotiate that you're allowed X number of dollars for training. In addition to that, I would say I'm always in favor of checking with other people who have worked there. It's a little harder for those who are working there currently, unless you know them personally, because they don't want to get in trouble. So you'd want to be careful about how you ask it. But people that used to work there, that's easier to ask them. What was the training like? What was the depth of it? What did you think? What was their training philosophy? And so on. If you click choose not to answer if you have a disability during an application process, for example, like on Indeed, but then you answer you do on some applications, is this information stored somewhere, even though the application says no one will see it, like the demographic info as well. It'll be stored with HR. No one else should be able to see it. I know at CSU, no one else can see it. I can't see it when I do a search for someone and I don't want to see it. And another point is, unless you feel very strongly about it, you don't want to divulge a disability until a job is offered. And then you can request reasonable accommodation if you need accommodation. You don't want to give them any reason to worry about whether or not you can do the job. You know that you can do the job. You wouldn't have applied for it if you didn't know that. So you can just explain to them the accommodation you need, and then that's that. They've already offered you the job. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you so much for joining us. Again, please reach out to me. As I said before, I absolutely love this job. I would love to work with you on your job search, professional development kinds of things, anything that you need. I've been doing this for 17, 18 years now. So there probably isn't anything that we couldn't work on. If there is, then I'll research it. I'll find the answer and I'll get it to you. All right. Thanks so much and good night.